I grew up in Sunnyside, Sunnyside, Queens, in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Was born in Elmhurst, and then we moved to Sunnyside when I was 5. And there's, grandma's still there, Lola's still there, Sunnyside. Back then, it was different than now. Now is, I mean, there's still violence and danger now, but in Queens, back back in the '80s, when I was like in elementary school, and then late '80s, early '90s in New York City, different time. No social media. There was a lot of gangs, a lot of fights, and yeah, when I was in seventh or eighth grade, there was people coming to the school to jump kids.
Mm.
You always had to walk, within a group or walk, looking, behind your shoulder. In the elementary school, I got into a couple of fights.
Mm-hmm.
Got into a couple of little fights. In high school, I got into a lot of fights. A lot of fights.
Mm.
The high school that I went to, there was it was just a lot of gang fights, people fighting, no sports. If I had gone to high school in Long Island, yeah, I probably would have competed. I definitely would have done wrestling and all that stuff if I went to school in Long Island.
Would you say those fights were the primary reason why, like, you got into Kali or like martial arts?
Yeah. A family friend who was teaching other family members. I knew he was teaching other family members, so I asked him to teach me.
Mm-hmm.
This was middle of high school, tail end of high school. So he started teaching me, martial arts. So he's taught me for like 10 years. And we were just doing it to learn how to fight. I didn't want you to go through that, so we moved to Long Island. Long Island is, it's not perfect, but still, it's much better than Queens, Manhattan. Nowadays, it's way different than growing up in New York City in the 80s or 90s. Less violence. There's still violence, of course. There's still gangs, but primary reason we moved out to Long Island is to get you guys away from stuff like that. I got you guys in Long Island and then put you guys in martial arts, jiu-jitsu, then eventually wrestling to keep you guys away from, the streets, keep you busy, but at the same time, teach you guys how to fight. I don't want you guys to fight, but if you had to fight, it's better to know something than know nothing.
Do you remember when we started wrestling? When was
it? You were in second grade? So it's been, 11 years? Give or take, something like that. I knew that starting wrestling was going to help you with jiu-jitsu. And then we had a lot of friends who were wrestling. A lot of the kids that were doing jiu-jitsu were wrestling. So we ended up going to a wrestling practice. But you guys were pretty good at it because you guys had a background in jiu-jitsu, so we ended up staying there. It was more cost effective to do wrestling than jiu-jitsu, because the wrestling practice was way cheaper. So that was one. And then eventually we started thinking about, there's a college can be in the future for wrestling. I mean, there's no college for jiu-jitsu. I mean, of course you can go into MMA or anything like that, but I don't want you guys to go into MMA. So I mean, at least there was an option to go to college.
Do you remember some of the stuff that you guys do outside of like taking us to clubs?
In the living room, we had a big mat, and then we would just spend like maybe an hour or two, maybe 2 hours on a Saturday.
Can you tell us what goes down in this place?
Drilling, lots of hours and hours and hours of drilling for many years.
How long have we had this?
Give or take 4 years. Spent a lot of time here, especially when COVID. There was no gyms open. There was no practices. We went over here and we just drilled during that whole COVID period. Just drilling on this little mat.
That was hell.
I would take you guys to the park, where we would run around do laps around the park. Over there's like monkey bars where you guys would do pull-ups and dips and push-ups. I mean, eventually when you got older, I started taking you to the gym and, took you, started driving upstate, started driving to Virginia Beach, started driving to New Jersey for tournaments and practices. But when you were little, we would just drill in the living room and then take you to the park and stuff like that. But between the club practice, there was a lot of time we spent at the club practice. So there wasn't a whole lot of time to do other things. We were at the club practice 5 days a week. 6 days a week, you guys were at wrestling practice anyway. So
Do you remember some of the extraneous stuff that you would do for us?
the national duels were in Virginia Beach. That's 8 hours away, 8 hour drive one way. Then we would be there for like 4 days because it would be like 4 days of matches all day. Of course, you're not wrestling every second, but you every day there was maybe like 3 or 4 matches, and then we would be there for 3 days. So you end up with about 10 matches over the course of a couple of days, and then we drive back 8 hours. And we did that, what, 2-3 times a year. We would go to Lake Placid, which is like several hours, 6 hours each way. We would go to Fargo. We went to Fargo a couple of times. I had to take you guys. Yeah, we would take a flight, right, to Fargo. Take a flight to Fargo. That's a whole mission right there. I mean, it's a couple $1,000. Couple thousand. Every time we took a trip was a couple $1,000. But I knew that it was good for you guys to get out of the local area, wrestle other kids that were good, wrestle some of the best kids in the country. That's the only way you're going to get better. There was one time we drove to Edinburgh in the middle of a blizzard. It was supposed to be a 6-hour drive. It ended up being like a 10.5-hour drive because I was driving like 30 miles an hour. That was really rough, pretty scary.
You were like essentially like our coach growing up. Wouldn't you agree?
Maybe a little bit. Maybe your coach, your driver, probably. Yeah, I mean, you could say that a little. I wouldn't say I'm your official coach. There was other coaches there, but I was definitely involved. Good or bad. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Sometimes as a dad, sometimes I'll give you words of encouragement. Sometimes I'd be, maybe discouraging you. Sometimes maybe. That's why I try not. I'm not your coach. I mean, like other people are your coaches. I'm like a fan. I'm like your dad, your fan. There's a lot to coaching because you got to wake up, you got to drive the kids to a tournament, you got to be there all day. You're spending 10, 12 hours, 13 hours sometimes coaching kids and then driving them back. It's different. It's different than me taking you guys, watching you guys wrestle, and then I can leave whenever I want.
When everything's all said and done, how do you feel about where we are now, how far we come?
Yeah, you guys have come a long way. I mean, you guys were like jiu-jitsu kids. Wrestling wasn't even in the picture. You guys were jiu-jitsu kids, ended up starting wrestling, and then now you wrestle for a D1 program. Besides the Olympics, D1 wrestling, college wrestling is the highest level of wrestling there is. You guys have come a long way. At the same time, I also know that it's a short period of time in your life. Once wrestling is over, there's other things you guys are going to do, and it's just a small piece of your life. I'm happy with where you guys are, but at the end of the day, it's like if you decided to stop wrestling today, I'd be happy, because I want you guys to pursue other things besides wrestling. Later on, when wrestling's over, you're only going to remember. You're not going to remember the match you lost 10 years ago. You're just going to remember that your dad was there. If you lose, if you win, it doesn't matter. I just want to be there.